Hello everyone, my name's Ryan King, and welcome to this complete beginner tutorial on how to do compositing with Blender. So this tutorial is a complete introduction to compositing, so by the end of this video you will have a very good overview of the basics of how to do compositing in Blender. So to start this video off, what is compositing? Compositing is some final editing and adjustments to make your final renders look really nice. Whether you're doing a final render, just a still image, or you're doing an animation, compositing is something that you do at the end of the render after Blender's done rendering. And you can do things like color correction, making your final render look really nice. You can also edit the image, so you can transform the image, move it around. You can also add filters and effects like vignettes and blurs and glows and things like that, and really just make the final image look really nice. And especially for things like visual effects, the Compositor is really great because you can add different footage together. You can add stock footage, you can add filmed video, as well as other effects and things, maybe 3D models that you're compositing into the scene or things like that. Real quick before we continue with the video, I wanted to thank this video's sponsor, Sketchfab. Sketchfab is an awesome 3D model site where you can preview 3D models in your browser. You can even view them in AR, VR, or on a phone or tablet. They also have a 3D model store where you can purchase models and assets. You can even apply to sell your own models on the platform. Check out Sketchfab with the links in the description. Alright, so when you're normally working on a project in Blender, you're probably going to be in the layout right here. And this right here is the T scene that I created. I actually made a tutorial on how to create this. Links in the description, and a card will be right up there if you'd like to watch this tutorial. So first what I'm going to do is just render this out, and then we're going to hop over to the Compositing tab. Alright, and here is the finished rendered image. Now to get over to the Compositor, there's a few ways that you can do that. You can click over on the Compositing tab right over here, or what you can do is you can click right here and go to the Compositor. So it's right down here, Compositor, so you could click on that. I don't want to do that. I'm just going to go back to the 3D view. I just like to use the Compositing tab, so I'm going to hop over here. All right, now we want to use the Compositing node, so make sure you click on this Use Nodes right here. And then later on, we are going to want to see the backdrop so we can actually see what the compositing is doing. So you're going to click on this backdrop button right here, and that's going to add a preview of what our image looked like in the background. Now it's not going to do it quite yet. That's because we need to add a node to do that, but we'll do that in a moment. All right, so how compositing in Blender works is you use nodes. So nodes are these little things right here. So this is a node and this is a node. They're basically these little boxes that you can move around. And then you have these wires and you plug the wires up to the boxes. And it goes from left to right. So you start with the boxes over here and you can see this is the render layers. And then it goes to the right, and then the final composite goes into this composite node. Now, if for some reason you don't see these nodes, you can press Shift-A and search for them. So if you press Shift-A, that's going to add nodes. Just like if you were in the 3D view in Blender and you wanted to add nodes, you could press Shift-A. You could also just go right here to add and then add nodes. Now, when you press Shift-A, you can see that there are a bunch of different groups here, and you can go inside them and see different things. There's things like color and filters and things like that. So you can definitely go through here and look for things. Usually though, I just go to the search because I'm just searching for things that I know are in Blender. So you could just click on the search and then type in render layers, click on that, drop it down here. And then you could also press Shift-A, search for composite, and then add that in there. I don't need these, so I'm going to click on them and then press X to delete them, and then click on this one and then press X to delete them. And then just click on this and drag it up so that it connects to the compositing. So if you've already used Blender's material nodes, like the shader nodes, if you go into the shading tab, you can see that there are nodes right here to do the shading. The Compositor is very similar in that it uses these nodes. So if you've done this before, then you're probably already familiar with nodes, but if you're not familiar with nodes, that's okay. I will go very slowly and explain them to you. But these shader nodes are different than the compositing nodes. So there are a few of them that are the same, but these act differently because what these are doing is these are telling it what material. So this is like the teapot material. So this material right here, whereas the compositing nodes, these are nodes that control the actual compositing for the actual finished render. Alright, now before we continue, I want to turn on a Blender add-on. It's built into Blender and it's very useful for doing anything with nodes. Now it's called the Node Wrangler. You may have heard this before because a lot of people use the Node Wrangler because it's really great. So what we're going to do is go to Edit, and then we're just going to open up the Preferences. Now right over here on the add-ons, if you go to the search here, you can start to type in Node Wrangler, and just check mark that. It's built into Blender, so it'll be there. You don't need to like download anything. So just turn that on, and then if you want it to be in all your future Blender projects, you can just click on the Save Preferences button right there, and then that way it'll be in all your future Blender projects. Alright, let's close the user preferences. Alright, so now that we've turned on the Node Wrangler, I can show you its different features. So it does have quite a bit of different features, but the main feature that it does is it allows you to preview different nodes while you're working on them. So if we want to preview the render layers, because right now we have the backdrop turned on, but you can't see it in the background. So to preview this node, we can hold down the Control and Shift key, and then we can click on a node. And you can see that it adds the viewer node, and just make sure this backdrop is turned on. So if you just drag this viewer node back over here, I don't know why I added it over there, but now you can see the backdrop is actually in the background, so we can actually preview this as we create it. And as we update things and add things in, it's going to update the background so we can actually see what's going on. Now this background right here, if you want to move it around or scale it, you can press V, and V is going to scale it down. And then if you want to scale it up, you can press Alt V. And then if you want to move the backdrop around, like maybe you want to move it over to the side or something, you can hold down the Alt key and then click with your middle mouse wheel, and that's going to move the backdrop around. I'm just going to leave it in the center here and maybe just scale this out a little bit. And then I forgot to say this, but if you want to move the nodes around, you just click and hold with your middle mouse wheel to move around, and then you can just click on nodes and drag them around. You can also press like R to rotate if you want to rotate nodes, G to grab, S to scale. It's not going to scale the actual node, but it'll scale how far away the nodes are from each other. And then you can also press A to select nodes and A to deselect nodes, just like in the 3D view in Blender. If you want to select all the objects, you can press A, and then you can also press B for the box select. Again, just like in the 3D side of Blender, you can use the box select to select nodes. So if you're familiar at all with the 3D side of Blender, then this should be pretty easy to grasp. So back to the viewer node, because we pressed Control and Shift and clicked on the render layers, it plugs in the viewer. So it adds a viewer and it plugs the wire up to it. You could also just press Shift A and search for a viewer node, but I'm not going to do that. And it plugs it up. Now, what you need to do is, if you want to preview it in the background, you need this to be connected up to the viewer, but then to actually do the compositing, you need this to be plugged up. So basically, at the end of your compositing, when you're all done compositing, just make sure that these are both plugged up, and these are the end result. So now what we can do to edit the image is we can add more nodes in between this wire. So the wire is transferring the data of the image into the viewer and composite, but if we put things in the middle, like color correction and things like that, it's going to edit the image and then it will go through the composite. So before we add our first node, I just want to show you the shortcut keys for the wires. So the wires are pretty basic. You can just drag them and plug them up, and then if you want to unplug them, you can just click, drag, and then let go. You can also hold down the Alt key and then you can right click and drag, and you can see what this is doing. Because I held down the Alt key and right clicked on this node, it selected it, and then it added this little wire here, and then I can just select a node and then just let go, and you can see that now it plugs it up. Now this might seem kind of pointless doing this like alt clicking when you could just plug this up right here, but when you have a really big node setup and you have nodes that are really far away from each other, it's a lot easier to hold down the alt key and then you can just right click and then that'll just connect up. Let me just unplug these. I don't want these to be connected. Now you can also cut wires and merge wires, and you can also add in these little dots right here in between wires. So let me show you how you do that. So if you want to cut a wire, what you can do is you can hold down the Control key and then you can right click, and you can see that it's going to add this little knife here, and then you can cut across the wire. You could also cut across more wires. So if you want to cut a bunch of them, you could do more, and then you just let go and you can see that it cut the wires. Let me just plug this back in. So again, hold down the Control key, right click, drag over, and then let go, and that'll cut the wire. Now, if you want to join wires together or add like an intersection in between wires, you can hold down the Shift key and right click and then go across here, and you can see it has a little crosshair, let go, and you can see what this does is it adds this little yellow dot right here. Now you can see that this render layers, it's connecting up to the viewer and compositing. So basically what this yellow dot is doing is it's just extending the one behind it, because this one is the render layers, so this one is going to here. So if we wanted to make this look a little bit nicer and not have it so messy, then what we could do is take this and replace it, and if we do that, that wire wire is just going to be disconnected. And now that looks a little bit nicer because there's only one wire, and then we could add in more nodes in between that. But remember, this little yellow dot right here, it's basically just an extension for this one because this one is right behind it. So the one that's behind it is basically just extending it over, and then you can connect these up. So it looks a little bit nicer, doesn't really matter, it's just your preference. So again, hold down the shift key and right click, and you could do this a bunch of times. If you wanted to add a bunch of dots, I don't really want that, so I'm going to press Ctrl Z to undo that. Now let me select this dot, and I'm going to press X to delete, and then I can just connect these wires up. If I want to connect these up with a dot very quickly, instead of adding a dot like this and then just plugging them up, if I want to connect them up automatically, what I can do is I can hold down the shift key and right click, but then I drag over both of them, and you can see that now not only does it add the dot, but it also merges them together. So that is really useful. Let me just delete this. Another way to add wires is if you click on this one and then hold down the shift key and click on this one, you can press F, and that's going to fill a wire in between these two nodes. So again, it's very similar to the 3D side of Blender, and I love the fact that Blender is very consistent with their shortcut keys, because if you've done any 3D modeling in Blender, you'll know that when you want to fill a face, when you're doing some modeling, you just select the vertices and then you press F to fill a face. So again, click on this, shift click on this, and then F to fill that. And then I think I will just shift and then right click and then drag through there and just add that little dot. Alright, so let's finally add the first node. So the first node and the biggest and main node that I always use is the Denoise node. Because you may have noticed this scene here, it's pretty noisy and doesn't look very nice. So if you press Shift A, you could find it down here. I just go to the search because that's quicker. So I click on the search, and then I start to search for denoise, and I just select this, and let's just drop it right here. So when you add in a new node, it's just going to follow your cursor, and you can just drop it where you want. Now, when you add a node, if you want to connect it up, you could manually click on this image, wire it up to the image, and then click on the image and wire it up to the image, and then just bring this up. But an easier way to do this, if I just connect this back up here, all right, an easier way to do this is just by dragging over the wire. And you can see the wire becomes white, so it's kind of telling you this is the wire you want to connect. And then you let go, and you can see that it's automatically going to connect it. And you can see now that the node has taken effect, and now the scene looks very smooth. So what it's done is it's taken the render layers, it's brought that data through the denoise, and it's telling the denoise to denoise the image, and then it's going through here and going to the viewer so that we can actually preview it, and then going to the composite so that it actually composites the final image. Now you remember at the beginning of the tutorial, we talked about the node wrangler. So the node wrangler will allow you to preview nodes. So for instance, if you want to preview the final render without the denoise, instead of deleting it, if you just want to preview this, you can hold down the Control and Shift key and click on the render layers, and you can see the node wrangler automatically plugs a wire up to this, and so it's plugging it up to the viewer, and so that way we can just view the image without the denoise. And then if we just want to preview the denoise, we can hold down the Control and Shift key, click on the denoise, and now you can see that it denoises it. And then I want this to be plugged up to this one. It's really the same thing, but I'll just Control Shift click on this to preview that. Now there is also another way to mute the nodes so that you can't see them if you just want to hide them for some reason. If you select a node and then you press M, that is going to mute the node. So you can remember M for mute, and you can see that it grays it out, and then it adds this little red line here. So basically Blender is imagining that this node was never here, and it's just going right through, and it's as if you just plugged this up. And then if I just select this and press M to unmute it, so if you press M, that's going to mute it, and then M to unmute it, you can see that now it does the little compositing. It has that little loading bar down there, and then it just composites the image. So the Denoise node is really awesome. It's really quite fast, and it does a really good job. And all the default settings work pretty well. Now you may have noticed that there's also some other things here like the normal and albedo. So basically most nodes, they will have multiple slots here with wires that you can plug into things. And these different slots here have different bits of data within them. So this normal here, if you want to plug a normal up to the denoise or an albedo up to the denoise, you could plug that in, and then it would have more data to use in order to denoise, and I'll show you how to do that. Now this render layers here, it has an alpha and a depth. So for instance, this alpha here, this is like transparency. So if for some reason you like rendered out a transparent background, you could preview this and it would show you where there's a transparent background. If you want to preview this, you can hold down the Control and Shift key and then click on a node, and then just click on the node again while you still have the Control and Shift key. And that's going to go down here. It's going to preview all of the different ones. Now this one only has one because there's the image going into the image, and there's also some other things here. I'll show you how to use these. And then the output here is the image, and this needs to go into the next one. Now, if you look at the alpha is just white, and that's because we don't have an alpha channel because we didn't render this out with a transparent background. So there's no alpha, so it's just white. Now, the denoise node does work really well on its own, and I don't really ever fiddle around with these because I just find that it doesn't really help that much. In some cases it might help, but for most things I just find that it doesn't really help, and it's not really worth the hassle, and it does take a little bit longer to composite. So I'll show you how you can use these other parts right here to improve the denoise node, but personally I don't really use it that much because I just don't find that it really helps. So if you click right over here, and this is the view layer properties, you can see that there are these passes right here. And so this is telling Blender that you want to turn on more things so that you can use the different data in the scene. So you can see that there is this denoising data. So if you turn this denoising data on, it's going to add all this stuff. Now, if I just Control Shift and click on this and then start to go down, you can see it has all these things here, but you can't preview them. That's because we need to re-render the image, and then it'll have all this data when we re-render. So let's just render this again. All right, and we just finished, so you can see it composited after it finished rendering. I'm just going to press Escape to go back to the compositor. All right, so now if I hold down the Control and Shift key and start to click on these, you can start to see that they have some data here. So there's like the denoising normal, so it actually has normal data that the denoising can use, and there's denoising albedo, there's denoising depth, shadowing, variance. I don't really use this very much, so I'm not super familiar with this, but yeah, it's got some interesting stuff here. If you wanted to give the denoise node a little bit more data to work with so that it can denoise the image a little bit better, is you could plug the denoising normal into the normal, and then you could plug the denoising albedo into the albedo. So you just click on it and then drag it over and then let go, and then click on it and drag over and let go to connect it up. And you can see it didn't really do anything. I mean, I didn't really notice any difference. Let's just get rid of these and then look at the background, and it finished. Nope, I didn't really notice anything. Now you could also plug this noisy image up to the image, and that does make a very small effect, but the image right here is pretty much the same as the noisy image. One thing that you can do is you can hold down the Control and Shift key and then actually click on these colors right here, on these little dots here, and then that's going to go to a specific one. But you can see the noisy image compared to the image, it's barely different. There's a little bit of a difference there in the T. So I usually just don't use this because I really just find that it doesn't really help. So I'm going to go back over here, and then the denoising data, I'm just going to turn this off. All right, so that is the denoise node. Now this is the main thing that I use. For most things that I do, I pretty much just use the denoise node, and then sometimes I do a little bit of color correction. So that's what I'm going to show you next. So if you press Shift A, click on the search here, my favorite node for doing color correction is the RGB curves, and there's also a few other ones. So I'm going to click in the RGB curves, and then remember, you can just drop this in right here automatically. So just click on that, it's going to drop it in there. And now the image, the data is going through the RGB curves, and then it's going through the denoise. So now we can start to edit this. So if you want to make the image like a little bit more contrasty with the RGB curves, you could like click and add a point here and drag up, and then you could also like click and drag down and add a point. Now you can see that it's compositing, and we kind of have to wait a little while. It only takes a few seconds, but because this denoise node takes a while to composite, when we start to have more and more nodes, it can actually take a long time for Blender to composite, and it takes at least a few seconds or longer for us to kind of see what we've actually done. So what we can do is we can click on the denoise, and we can just press M to mute it. Or we could press Control and Shift and then click on the RGB curves just to preview that. And now you can see, if we just start to play around with this, it's very quick. You can see like less than a second and it updates. So this is a lot better. So I'm just going to use this because that way it's just a lot easier to actually see what we're working with. You could also go to the red, green, and blue and just change the colors. Like if you want more red, you could drag this up or drag it down. I don't really want this, so I'm going to press X to get rid of it. And then we can Control Shift and click back on this here, and then click on this, and to unmute it, you can press M, and that will unmute the node. So now we can see this is what our image looks like. All right, now another node that I really like to use for color correction is the color balance. So just click on this, and again, we can just drop it right in here, and it's automatically going to wire it up through the image right here. So this is pretty cool. You've got lift, gamma, and gain, and you can like drag these around to kind of change the colors. And again, you can see this is kind of taking a while to composite, so I'm just going to click on this and press M to mute the denoise, and that way we can just edit this a lot faster. We don't have to worry about waiting for that to denoise every single time. So now we can just kind of drag these around. We can make it darker or lighter. Now you can definitely go through here and play around with nodes and see what they do, but I'm going to show you two more nodes for color correction. So the first one is the hue saturation value node. So if you just press Shift A, search for the hue saturation value, you can see here it is. And again, I'm just going to drop it in here. You could really drop it in anywhere around here. It doesn't really matter. For these different nodes, you could really drop it anywhere you want. There are some cases where some nodes need to come before or after other nodes, but for things like this, this isn't really going to affect anything. So I could like just stick this in the middle here. So the hue saturation value node will change the hue. So if you change this, you can see that once it loads up, let me just click on this and press M again to mute it. You can see it's actually changing the hue, so the blue is turning more red and more pink. Now the saturation, this is how saturated the colors are. So if they're less saturated, they're going to be more black and white. And then if you desaturate the image, it's going to be fully black and white. And then if you want everything to be more and more saturated, you can turn this way up, and now everything is super, super saturated. Now the value, if you turn this up, you can see everything's a bit more white or light. And then if you turn it down, everything's a bit more dark. All right, so one more node I want to show you for color correction. You can press Shift A and search for the hue correct node and just drop this right in here. So what this node does is you can take certain colors and you can either make them more saturated or less saturated. So this saturation here, this just plays around with the entire saturation of the scene. But for instance, if you only wanted to make the blue colors less saturated, you could just click on this blue and drag it down. And I need to kind of drag the ones next to it. So this light blue one as well. And I'm just going to drag these all the way down. And you can see what it's doing. All the blue part, they're starting to get less and less saturated, but the rest of the scene stays the same. So you can see this is almost like a gray. If I like drag this out, I can probably get this to completely gray if I drag these out. Also, if you wanted to turn up the saturation on just the specific color, you could do the same thing, but just instead of dragging it down, drag it up. And you can see now the blue values are super, super saturated, but again, nothing else really changes because these are staying at the center, which is in the middle here. And then maybe you wanted to make just the red parts way less saturated. You could like turn this way down and turn this way down. Now you can see that just the red parts are desaturated, so it kind of just makes the wood less saturated. Now I don't really want this node, so I'm going to delete it. So you could just press X to delete it and then plug this back up. I'm going to press Ctrl Z to undo that because there is actually a quicker way. So if you want to delete this node but still have this connected up, instead of pressing X to delete or the delete button, you can press Ctrl X. And you can see that what that does is it just gets rid of the node and then just plugs this up. And let me just see here, I've never tried this before, but let me just press Ctrl Delete. Yeah, it does the same thing. So Ctrl X or Ctrl Delete. All right, now this image is still pretty noisy, so let's just click on this and press M to unmute the denoise. All right, so now let's go over some other filters and effects. So the first one that I'm going to show you is I'm going to press Shift A and I'm going to start to type in blur. So this is a pretty basic one. I can just drop it right in here. So this node does exactly what it's named. It blurs the image. So there's this X and this Y, so if you drag this out, you can see that it's going to start to blur this on the X axis, or the Y axis. It kind of looks like maybe the camera's moving and there's like some motion blur. Now, if you want the image to be evenly blurred, you could click, drag down, and then let go, and then you could type in a number, or you could click, drag down, and then start to drag this around. There you can see now the image is nice and blurred. I don't really want this though, so I'll just click on this and then press Ctrl X to delete. But if for some reason you wanted to blur the image, that would be a great way to do it. Now there are a lot of cool filters. I'm just going to show you the main ones that I like to use, but if you press Shift A and go to filter, you can see there's a bunch of different things here. So we've already looked at the blur. There's also this denoise here. We already looked at that. So this glare here, this is actually really useful, and I use this for a lot of things, especially if I have like maybe some sci-fi character or something and I want to like make some glowing lights, or maybe a sci-fi ship and I want things to glow, or maybe you have like a moonlight scene, or maybe you have like some sunshine or a light or something. something, and you basically just want there to be some glow or some glare around the light, then this is really useful. So I'm just going to click on the glare and just drop it in here. Now there's a few different types of glares, because you can see this first one here is streaks, and you can see what this does is it basically just makes it a little shine. So it almost looks like the light is bouncing off of the teacup and going right into your eyes, and it's adding in that little shine there. It's like sparkly clean. So the first one is this streaks right here. The next one is ghosts. So if you click on ghosts, let's just let that load up. So what this glare node is doing is it's taking all the brightest values. So you can see there's like that little bright value right there, those little highlights, and then it's glaring it because it takes the brightest parts of the scene and then adds the glare. So this could be really useful if you want to make some sort of like lens glare or lens flare. You know, like on a camera, sometimes there's like a little bit of a flare when you're like filming something. Maybe you're like filming the sun, there's a little bit of a flare there. That could be really useful. Let's go to the next one, which is my favorite. So this one is fog glow, and this is very basic. It basically just adds a nice glow around the brightest areas. So you can see right there, there it is, fog glow. Now there's also some different sizes. So if you want it like high, it's going to be like higher quality, and the glare is also going to be a bit smaller. So you could change that to high. If you turn it to low, it's going to be a little bit lower quality, and it'll also be a little bit bigger. So you can see like that. Let me just turn this to high. If you wanted to make it even bigger, you could actually add more glares. So if you like selected this, press Shift D to duplicate it, and then just drop it right in there, it's going to add 2 glares. And there we go, it's even brighter. And you could just do this a bunch of times, like add a bunch of glares, and then it's going to make it really, really bright. This is way too much though, so I'm going to press Control X and just delete these until we're back to just 1. All right, so the last one is this simple star. So let's just let this load up. So there we go. This one here is similar to the streaks, but you can see it's more like a star. So that is the glare node. And I think what I'll do is just turn this maybe to streaks. I think that looks pretty nice. There's also another really cool node that I wanted to show you. If you press Shift A and then search for a lens, you can see that there's this lens distortion. This is a really cool node. Let's just add this in. So if you just start to distort this like by 0.1 or something, you can see that it's starting to get distorted. It kind of has like a fisheye effect. And then if you click on fit, you can see that there's these black areas, but that'll fit it. But then maybe just turn this up to like a 0.5, and we'll just let that load up. So you can see it's really starting to distort that. But the other really cool thing, if I turn this back to 0 and just turn this off, is this one right here. So this one is the dispersion. So if you turn this up to like a 0.1, you can see what it's starting to do. So you can see it's giving this really cool, almost like a sci-fi feel. This is a very classic like sci-fi look, this lens distortion effect. So if you can like turn this up really high, but it's basically making like all these little rainbow kind of things. And then in the center here, it's not really distorted, but then as it goes out, it's kind of getting more and more distorted. So it doesn't really look very good for this like tea scene, but it is pretty cool, especially for like sci-fi things. I'm just going to click on this and then press Control X to delete it. All right, so those are all the filters that I'm going to show you. Those are the main ones that I use. You could like check out the other ones, they're pretty cool, but those are the main ones that I use. All right, so now I wanted to talk about adding in external images into your compositing. So what you can do is instead of just using the render layers, you can actually add in images that you have on your computer, and you can composite those images. And you can also do that for videos too, especially like if you're doing some visual effects, you can add in video files and then you can composite those videos. So to add in external images, it's pretty easy to do. What you do is you press Shift A, and I'm just going to search for an image, and then you can just drop the image right down here. Now this one here, you can see that the top is red, and so we want this to be at the starting, and then we want it to composite all the way through. So this one we want to be at the starting up here, and then we can have it go through. And then what you can do is you can just click on open to open up an image. So I'm just going to open up this image here from my Rubik's Cube Blender tutorial. Links in the description if you'd like to watch that. Let me just add this in. Now another really quick way to add in images is you can just open up the image in your file browser, and then you can just drag and drop the image in. So just drop it in like that, and you can see now here's the same thing, so I'll just use this instead. So again, if you want to preview just this node, you can press Control and Shift and click on the node, and that's going to preview it. So let's say we want to add this image on top of this one. What we can do is we can use a node to combine these two images. So what I'm going to do is press Shift A, and I'm going to search for an alpha over node. Here's the alpha over node. We can just click on this and then just drop it right here. And this alpha over node will allow you to combine two images together. So we can take this render layers and we could also take this image. So if you take this image and you plug it up to this one, and then Control Shift and click on the alpha over to preview it, you can see that it's actually added them together, but this image is on top of this one. So if we just flip this, now you can see that this image is on top of this one. So what we need to do is actually scale one of these down, and there is an easy way to do this. Let's just flip this back because I want this one to be on top of this one. So to scale this image, there is actually a node to scale the image. So we can press Shift A, and I'm going to search for a transform node. There it is, transform. So we're just going to click on the transform node. Now we don't want to put this transform node right in here because we don't want to transform all of the image. We just want to transform this image and then we want to plug it up. So this transform node needs to go right here so that there is the image, then it gets transformed, and then it is combined, and then there's all the color correction and all that. So let's Control Shift and click on the transform so we can preview it. So this is pretty simple. There's the angle, you can rotate it, you can also scale it, and then you can also move it on the X and Y. So I just want to scale it down, something like that, and then I can Control Shift and click on the alpha over, and now you can see that it's combining these two together. So this image is on top of this image. And you could also like make it higher if you wanted to kind of make it in the corner. Let's actually kind of pull it to the side and maybe down. And then let's just press V to zoom out the background. And there you go. So now if you want to preview the final thing, you can just Control Shift and click on the glare, or just Control Shift and click on this little dot right here. And it's going to go through and it's going to do all of the color correction to both of these images. So there we go, and there is the final image. Now, if you wanted all of these to color correct this image, but not color correct the Rubik's Cube image, what you need to do is you need to combine these two after all of these here. So if I just kind of push these together to make them a little bit smaller, what I need to do is I need to move this alpha over node over here and then plug the image up so that first it does all the compositing and then it adds the Rubik's Cube image on top. So let's just click on this alpha over and we're going to press Shift D to duplicate it. And I'm just going to drop it right over here. Now this transform and this square here, we need to select this and then Shift select this, and then I can press G to grab, and we're just going to move this right over here. Now it's still connected up here. I don't really want this anymore, so I'm going to press Control X and that will delete it, but still keep it plugged up. So now what it does, if I just Control Shift and click on this, you can see that it's going to go through, it's going to take the render layers, put it through all of these color correction nodes, and then we can add this after. So let's take the transform and we'll plug this up to the image. So what we're doing is we're taking this square image right here, this Rubik's Cube, and we're transforming it. So we're scaling it and moving it down, and then we're plugging it up with the alpha over node and combining them together. So as you can see, sometimes where you place them in the chain can be very important to what the final image looks like. Now you can also do this with images that have an alpha channel. So what I'm going to do is actually drag and drop in the official Blender logo. So I downloaded this logo here. If I just Control Shift and click on this, this is the official Blender logo. I downloaded it from blender.org, and you can see that it has an alpha channel because there is that cutout right there. So what I can do is I can add this in. So if I wanted to, I could just replace it for this one right here and not be using these. So you can see I just plugged the image up to this one, and now if I Control Shift and click on this, wait for it to composite, and there we go. So now it's added in this Blender logo on top of it. And because this image has an alpha channel, it's actually being cut out, and so we can see the image behind the Blender logo. So if you want to add in this Rubik's Cube on top of these two, you can do the same exact thing. So what you do is you take the alpha over, I'm going to press Shift D to duplicate it and just drop it right here. And then I need to click on this one, Shift click on this one, and press G to grab and just put it over here. And let me just box select these and press G to move them over. So now what I can do is take this image, plug this up here, and now what we're doing is this alpha over is combining the teapot and the Blender logo, and we're plugging that up, so this alpha over is combining them. And then we are taking this alpha over to combine this one and the Rubik's Cube. So now we have three different elements. Now this Blender logo, you could also transform it. So if you want to just click on the transform node, press Shift D to duplicate it. We want to only transform the Blender logo, so before it goes into the alpha over, we need to plug it up right here. So I'll just add it in. So now we can just scale this and move it. Let me just Control Shift and click on this so we can see it. And then we can just move this so I can scale this. I could rotate it if I wanted to. And then I could just like stick it right over here in the corner, something like that. All right, so we are almost done with this compositing for beginners tutorial, but I want to show you how to deal with animation. So if you have like a video file and you want to add that in, or maybe you're rendering out an animation or you want to animate some things, I'll show you how to do that. So what I'm going to do is go back to layout, and I think I will actually just select these and delete them because I want it to render a lot faster. So I'm just going to press Shift A and I'm going to add a cube. So I have this cube here and I'm just going to add a timeline, and I want to just do a basic animation. So on frame 1, I'm going to bring this back, and then I'll press I, insert location, and then I'm just going to go over like 40 frames, press G to grab, move this over, and then go I and insert location. So then what you do is you press Control F12 and that will render an animation, and you can see that it renders the first frame and then it goes through and it composites. So you can see that the compositor automatically works. When you render this out, it's going to automatically do the compositing. So let's just escape this now. We'll go back to the compositing. So let's say I want to animate something, like for instance this little cube image here. Let's say I want to animate this. This is really easy to do. Let's just drag down, click up here and drag down, and then we're going to make a timeline. So I'm just going to click right here, and then we'll just change this to a timeline. So you can see here is our timeline. What you can do is you can actually animate these different values. So if you want to move this during the animation, we could just go to frame 1, and then we need to actually add keyframes into these values so that we can animate it. So I just want to animate like the X and Y values. So to add in a keyframe, you can hover your mouse over this value, and then you can press I, and that's going to insert a keyframe, and then press I, and that's going to insert another keyframe. Now what you can do is you can go to the last frame, and then you can just change these. So maybe I want to just like pull these up, and these color correction nodes are actually making the compositing take a lot longer. So I'm just going to delete them. So I'm just going to select them, press Control X, Control X, Control X, and just delete those just so that it's a lot simpler to work with. All right, so now I can just bring this cube up on the y-axis, and I'm actually going to press M on the denoise to have it not denoise that, and that way it's a lot faster. I'm just going to bring this up and then maybe just slightly bring it over. So now we're at the end frame 40. We can just click on this, press I, click on this one, press I, and that'll add a keyframe. And now you can see that when we scrub through this, this is actually moving. So that is really cool. So all these values can be animated. And then the last thing is how to add in video files. So if you want to add in video files, you can press Shift A here. And there's a couple ways to do this. You could search for a movie clip and you could add this, or you could also just press Shift A and search for an image. So it will work either way. So you can use the movie clip or the image. Let's just add these in. So I'm going to click on Open to add this in. All right, and here is my procedural lava tutorial. So I'm just going to double tap on this to add it in. So again, just like any other node, if you press Control and Shift and click on it, you can actually preview it. So now if I start to scrub through this, you can see that the video is playing, and that is exactly what we want. So let's just clean this up a little bit because I don't want as many of these. So I'm just going to like delete some of these. Maybe I'll just delete this. This one, I'll press Control X to delete it. What I want to do is I just want to have the render layers and then add the movie clip on top. Just like all the other nodes, if you have this movie clip and you want to combine it with this, you could just add it in, just drag it down here and add it in there onto the alpha over. And now you can see it's mixing these two together. And then again, you could add a transform node. So Shift A, search for a transform, drop this in here, and then you could change the scale. So if you want to like make this video file really small, there it is. It's very small. And then let's just delete the render layers, hue saturation, and the denoise. And then we'll also just press Control X to delete the alpha over. And then as I mentioned earlier, you could also just use an image and import a video. So I'm just going to press Shift A here, search for an image. I'll just drop this image here and then I'll just plug this up. And then let's just click on Open to open this up. And here we go, the procedural lava tutorial. So I can just click on this movie clip and press X to delete it because we have this one. So this one does have some other benefits. For instance, it has these frames here and the start frame. On the default, it just starts at frame 1. But if you wanted to wait for the video to start, like maybe wait till frame 20, then you could click on the start frame and then just type in 20. And then also the frames here, you have to turn this up because right now you're only telling Blender to use the first frame. So the frames, just type in like 1000, just type in a giant number so that you make sure you use all the frames. So now you can see the start frame is at frame 20. So all of these frames, it's not moving at all. But then once you get to frame 20, then the video starts to play. Alright, and that's it. So that is going to finish up this beginner tutorial on how to use Blender's Compositor. If you'd like to help support what I do and also get the project files for my different tutorials, then you can do that over on my Gumroad store and my Patreon page. The links are in the video description. But again, thanks for watching. I hope this video was helpful, and I will see you in a future video.